U.S. think tank has called Beijing's response to the latest round of U.S. tariffs bogus. But what's behind these bitter claims, and what's the latest in the China-U.S. trade war? And a suicide bomber killed 149 people in Pakistan on Friday, just the latest in a string of attacks leading up to Pakistan's general elections. What's being done, and how can security be boosted in the volatile regions? Welcome to The Point, live from Beijing. I'm Xiyu. The U.S. think tank Information Technology and Innovation Foundation recently responded to China's statement on U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods, saying Beijing is engaged in a massive global effort to gain the moral high ground by painting the U.S. as an unfair protectionist and China as a paragon of free trade virtue. In the article, the president of the Institute, Robert Atkinson, reviewed China's statement and concluded that China's economic success was based on mercantilism, saying China has practiced forced technology transfer on foreign companies and worked to limit U.S. imports, including semiconductors. The report conveniently neglects the fact that the U.S. has conducted a technology blockade on China and prevented Chinese technological companies, including Huawei, from entering the U.S. market. So do these accusations have any legitimacy? Facing challenges from outside, how will China change its role from a passive learner to a leading innovator? And how will it promote science and technology development? I'm joined in the studio by Professor Baocheng from the University of International Business and Economics, and Dr. Chen, Xiaowe, co-founder of Wiznut, a high-tech company providing solutions to entrepreneurs. The warmest welcome to both of you. Thank you. Professor Liu, let me start with you. Now, in his article, Mr. Atkinson mentioned the forced technology transfer and accused China of the theft of U.S. intellectual property. However, China has repeatedly said that it never made this kind of request to foreign companies, and cooperation between Chinese and foreign companies in technology and other economic and trade fields is contract behavior purely based on voluntary principle. Why are these accusations hurled against China in your eyes?
Well, I have my PhD in business law. Actually, I checked all around, in every corner, almost all the pieces of government regulation and laws, etc. You don't really find a single article that really force any multinational to really surrender their technology to China. So yes, China has a strategic intention that we really want to change our market for technology, which is really very much understandable, and I think it's wise enough because technology is nothing more than a commodity. It has commercial value, so therefore let's discuss on mutual benefit and by voluntary agreement. So there's nothing wrong with that. And also the fact that technology has limited life cycle. If you really put it on the shelf, it doesn't worth a penny. Only if you really put it into practice and translate into US dollars by either charging the royalty or turn it into equity positions within a company, you don't get anything. So I think China offered the opportunity for many multinational companies to realize a better value of the technology. And plus, China has never targeted the US only, really to have technology cooperation. And neither China really imposed anything that is really discriminating the U.S. companies that are working with China. So businesses have their own calculation, and they have their cost and benefit analysis, and they come up with very rational solutions.
Right. Actually, during a China Business Report which came out, which was released by AmCham Shanghai just most recently, almost double the number of American businesses in China say they don't feel the pressure to transfer their technology than the company that feel the pressure. So,
and also one fact is that actually by the basic calculation that 15 years ago, when China joined WTO, we paid roughly only $2 billion for the technology transfer to China. But last year, China paid nearly $30 billion for technology transfer. We were ranked the number 4 largest payer in the world for technology licensing to China. So this clearly shows that we are respecting the intellectual property, and we are contributing actually to the commercialization of intellectual properties.
Another thing on Mr. Atkinson's list of things about China is that China's joint venture structure, which limits the percentage of foreign investment to a joint venture company, has to be under 50%. And Mr. Atkinson said that that showed it is unfair for foreign companies. What has been happening is China has actually been gradually easing these kind of curbs, for instance, in banking, automotive, heavy industry, agriculture, and now they are allowing 50% foreign ownership of brokerages and life insurers, and that commitment, that cap will be removed entirely by 2021. There's also the lifting of a single foreign financial institution stake in a Chinese commercial bank by 20%. That will also be gone as of July the 28th. In the first place, why did China have these limitations, and why is China slowly lifting them?
Well, I think now we have to clarify there's no correlation between forced technology transfer versus the government or the governance structure of an individual entity that is really being registered or being newly formed in China. So, I think now many intellectuals even really confused over that aspect. And as for the governance structure in terms of the joint venture, etc., so yes, China wanted to learn the management expertise, and also many multinationals, when they first enter into China, and they would love to have a very capable Chinese partner to work with. And also the fact that more and more of those joint ventures over the past 15 years have turned out to be more of the solely owned businesses after they really learned the Chinese culture, built up their own distribution channel, and that was it. So I think now the ownership requirement in terms of the equity position is really something that China devised to help also the multinationals to work better with China. And in the meantime, of course, we have our own legitimate objective to really to bring more management expertise, and also by bring updated technologies that Chinese companies can also acquire.
Yeah, Dr. Chen, you have also observed this process, observing how foreign enterprises have been coming into China and cooperating with Chinese enterprises. How did you look at this process?
It is a gradual process in which the international, as Professor Liu said, the international companies are learning more and more about the local markets. And at the same time, China has purchased technology, and China has respected intellectual property rights. I want to go back to the first question where you raised the issue of protectionism. Protectionism often works as a double-edged sword. It may not necessarily foster innovation. Think about it this way. If the U.S. exercises protectionism, such as banning China from exporting or put a tariff on Chinese products, and the U.S. the U.S. technology companies would enjoy a virtual market monopoly, that may or may not be a good thing for innovation. Nothing fosters innovation better than necessity. When we look at, say, Kodak, for instance, it had a virtual monopoly on film market, but that has created comfort in the technology companies, and comfort and lack of motives to innovate new products. So the U.S. needs to be clearly minded about how protectionism can work in a double-edged sword way.
Right. In 1996, the U.S. and its allies signed the Wiznut arrangement for export control for conventional arms and dual-use goods and technologies, and excluded China from this club. Under this agreement, the U.S. has imposed restrictions on exports of high technologies that give comparative advantage, such as semiconductors. As the result of such blockades, China had worked on its own high-tech products. Now, Professor Liu, what's the timeline for China compared to those major powers, the U.S., the EU, for example, in such industries?
Well, of course, at latecomers, you really draw on the very basic knowledge and scientific foundations to develop your technology. Of course, you really can move forward far quicker than the first discovery. So China basically advanced the invention cycle by roughly 10 to 15 years. And that's also the basic formulation, actually, many of those developing countries who are eager to catch up with. But in the meantime, China has not really surpassed, as many people have exaggerated, the entire leading position that is going on both in North America and in Europe. So it's really the Chinese market, the Chinese, for a bigger application of those technologies that generate the commercial gain that really is envious.
I want to draw our attention away from singly focusing on chips and semiconductors. Yes, the ZTE case is a high-profile case, and it has raised everyone's attention to chips and semiconductors. But in many areas of key core technologies, China lags far behind. And I really want to draw people's attention to biotech, including agriculture. A nation cannot be safe or secure with its energy and food being imported. Now, China imports both energy and food, so we have a long way to catch up in terms of biotech, agricultural technology, and energy technology.
So what has this trade war taught us? That we are lagging behind in many fields, that we have to continue to work on ourselves, and on the other hand, the accusation that China is overtaking everybody, right, threatening everybody, is probably unfounded, Professor Liu.
Well, I think China, after centuries of depression and also being semi-colonized, and Chinese people do need certain dreams to build its own confidence. But the fact that we have to be very rational in facing the reality is something that we also need to really to reflect. So right now, China is really doing pretty well in terms of applying those technologies for commercialization. For example, we didn't invent internet, but e-commerce is really thriving in China.
Yeah. What does that say about the importance of initiatives such as Made in China 2025, when a lot of China's key sectors, core technologies, are so much lagging behind? What's the rationale behind such initiatives?
I think Made in China 2025 particularly touched the raw nerve of the Trump administration, because when President Trump was running for office, he made a promise to especially blue-collar workers in the United States that he's going to bring jobs back to the United States. Now, Made in China 2025 directly clashes with that. And so blue-collar workers are concerned that jobs are going back to China.
What's the reality?
The reality is, what China really said was intelligent manufacturing. Now, the U.S. workers need to think about that the U.S. technology companies are also developing technologies that help intelligent manufacturing. That means the blue-collar workers in the United States are not losing their jobs to Chinese workers. They're going to lose their jobs to robots.
Yeah.
So, again, I think the valuable lesson from the trade war to be learned for China is that China needs to catch up in many areas, far beyond just chips and semiconductors. And China really needs a special spirit of craftsmanship. That in all through the last 4 decades, we have been in so much of a rush that we have been innovating shortcuts, not technologies. And this is a time that we bear down and really develop our own technologies.
Okay, we have to leave it there. Many thanks to my two guests, Professor Liu Baocheng from the University of International Business and Economics, and Dr. Chen Xiaowe, co-founder of Wiznut. You have been watching The Point with Li Xin, and we'll take a short break, and when we come back, I'll look at the suicide bombing that killed 149 people in Pakistan and the factors fueling the recent spike in violence. Stay with us. 149 people are dead and over 180 injured after a suicide bomber targeted an election campaign rally in the Mastoon area of Pakistan's southwest Baluchistan province on Friday. The target, political leader Nawab Zada Siraj Razani, and 9 children between the ages of 6 and 11 were among the victims. The Islamic State terrorist group claimed responsibility for the bombing, which is one of the deadliest militant attacks since the country's independence independence in 1947. The bombing came less than 2 weeks before the country's general election on July the 25th, and is just the latest in a string of attacks aimed at politically active figures this month. So what factors are fueling this surge in violence? What is the government doing to protect its candidates and citizens leading up to the election? And how is the violence affecting economic and political relations between Pakistan and China? Joining me for the discussion from Lisbon, Portugal today is Yasir Habib Khan, an investigative journalist and columnist based in Pakistan. And here in the Beijing studio, Zun Ahmed Khan, a research fellow at the Institute of the Belt and Road Initiative at Tsinghua University, and Professor Yang Xiyu, senior fellow at the China Institute of International Studies. Welcome to all of you. Mr. Han in Lisbon, let me go to you first. Now, besides Friday's bombing, several other attacks were staged against election candidates just this month. On the same day as the mass tomb bombing, as I mentioned, at least 4 people were killed and dozens of others injured in an explosion in another province. Another suicide attack killed 20 and wounded 63 in the northern city of Peshawar. So what are the common factors linking these attacks? Just because the general election is coming up, or something else more complex?
Yeah, in fact, always, whenever there are elections, the momentum of elections, always, people want such kind of a momentum to go on. But, the terrorist, groups, they don't want the elections and peace in elections, because it doesn't favor to their ulterior, their agenda. They want to disrupt the election. They want to sabotage the election so that the electoral process could not be completed and Pakistan could not move on to democratic process and have an elected government. So,
okay.
So far, I believe that there is a caretaker setup, and in a caretaker setup, I believe that always is poor and weak in administration and implementing its policies.
Mm-hmm.
It lacks strategy, it lacks administration and the strategy, and so that's why I believe that is the point which is being exploited by the terrorist group.
Okay.
And so that's why, I mean, that wave is going on.
Okay.
And we expect more terrorist attacks on election rallies.
Mm-hmm. Zun Ahmed Khan here in the studio. Overall, Pakistan has seen a decline in terrorist attacks, and I'm talking to the guest here in the studio here. Now, according to the Pakistan Security Report 2017 released last January by the Pak Institute for Peace Studies, there has been a 16% year-on-year drop in terror attacks last year. Many people point to the government of Pakistan's National Action Plan, or NAP, launched in 2015 as the factor behind the drop. What from the NAP is working and what needs to change?
Well, firstly, I think I would like to highlight, just as the previous guest mentioned, that the election time is a sensitive time in terms of maintaining stability. It is also a very crucial time because the world is watching.
Mm-hmm.
So when we speak of NAP, it is firstly important also to understand that Pakistan, for the many years, as you just mentioned, has consistently been quite successful in countering terrorism. And the current attacks can be understood in the bigger picture of Pakistan's current regional partnerships, which is a very anti-Daesh regional partnership between China, Russia, Pakistan, Iran. Just one day before this big attack in Mustang, the intelligence heads of all of these countries were in Pakistan having a meeting. So really, if we want to understand, it's not just the election time, it cannot be understood in terms of how previous elections worked, but it is a very, very decisive election. So if we look at it practically, Pakistan is already extremely overstretched. Pakistan's forces are not only securing the western and eastern border, they're also trying to ensure safety inside the borders. And now we are looking at a situation where we need more intelligence-related leads to counter this. If we are to expect more such attacks, then it is important for us, it's impossible to 100% ensure the safety. And it is crucial for us to do that, because anyone who is trying to attack the election process or to harm it is doing that with the intention to discredit the election process itself.
Professor Yang, let me come to you. According to the same Pakistan Security Report 2017, Baluchistan remains one of the most critical areas, with 288 terrorism-related killings in 2017. Why is Baluchistan so volatile against terrorist attacks, and what has the government been doing in curbing the violence?
Well, I think the reason is very complex, based on contradictions among ethnic groups and the different religious belief organizations. So obviously this latest terror attacks targeting at election, but the concrete target is some of the groups of ethnics and religious beliefs. So basically the complex contradictions is really the root of the rising up and down of the terror attacks, and as well the gaps between the rich and the poor, the gap between the regions, between the Balochistan province and others, also contribute to the rising of a terrorist movement there.
Let me go back to Yasir Habib Khan in Lisbon. Now, at a briefing days before Friday's attack, military spokesperson Major General Asif Ghafoor announced plans for the vast security operation as polling starts. He said almost 372,000 security personnel will be deployed. That includes around 135,000 reservists and 4,000 personnel, each from the Pakistan Air Force and Navy. How effective do you think these efforts will be, and is there anything else that needs to be done?
Yeah, I believe that as far as the army has made a lot of arrangements and has a foolproof plan for the deployment of a lot of forces to have a to prevent that kind of terrorist attacks. But I believe that with this that kind of arrangement, the political leadership also needs to come and to put the action together, because with the civilian authority and the military authority, then we can, face this challenge, with conviction. One thing, and I want to add that we have two authorities. One is NACTA, National Action, NACTA, and one is another. We have a policy, National Internal Security Policy. So if we talk about the NACTA, so NACTA is so far it was established in 2009, but so far it remains slumber, and so far it hasn't been empowered too much to deal with that kind of the worst situation. And second, the last government, the Interior Minister Ahsan Iqbal also unveiled a policy, National Internal Security Policy. Still, this policy is very vague and sketchy.
Okay.
And so I mean to say that we have a lot of policies, a entity, so we have arrangement regarding as we have I have told you about the army. So, but I believe that unless all the authorities, all the forces, all the political parties, they put their heads together, we cannot, prevent that kind of situation.
Let's talk about the implication for China and Chinese investment as well. Most recently, there has been a most recent meeting by an international money laundering watchdog, and Pakistan is put on the grey list of so-called countries with strategic deficiencies in anti-money laundering and counterfeiting financial and countering financial terrorism. China also voted to support putting Pakistan on that list. What is China's consideration here?
Well, basically two factors are driving China's decision on that issue. One factor is this is a very sensitive and controversial point between China and the Western countries, primarily the United States. And China has successfully derailed U.S. efforts on putting Pakistan on the so-called blacklist. But meanwhile, the second factor is there are indeed some shortcomings of Pakistani government on cracking down the money laundering that really need to be improved. So at the final, the green list is the commonly accepted results. So China make decision based on the fact that the majority of the international committee members regard Pakistan really containing some shortcomings in that area. And that's not the single action by China. China, on one hand, vote for what we had done, you mentioned. And meanwhile, China has prepared to help Pakistan to improve, to strengthen the effort to improve their financial system, so that pull Pakistan out of the so-called grey list as soon as possible.
Yeah, Zuna, let me come to you. What do you think this violence is having to do on China and Pakistan's relationship, both in terms of security, political relationship, and the lot of Chinese investments that's going into the Belt and Road Initiative?
Well, actually, I would like to add that China and Pakistan both believe that bringing economic prosperity, bringing better opportunities to the youth of Pakistan, and generally the Belt and Road Initiative is also has this philosophy that bringing better opportunities can allow the youth pulse to be involved in more conducive activities. So I think that the China-Pakistan relationship is strengthened also because they both have the same interests. Pakistan and China both are trying to bring economic prosperity, and through the projects and through the investment, what can happen is that areas in Pakistan that were previously not even that did not have a very strong grid of state are now going have, because of the projects, a lot of security involved. So I think in terms of understanding the implications of these events and incidents, both China, Pakistan and the region at large are affected negatively by such events. So Pakistan needs China's support and help in improving its situation and further stabilizing.
We're going to leave it there. Many thanks to my three guests, Yasir, Habib Khan, joining us from Lisbon, Portugal, here in the Beijing studio, Zhu Ahmed Khan, and Professor Yang Xiyu. And that is it for this edition of The Point with me, Li Xin. As always, follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with Alex. Download the application called CGTN to watch the show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point.